Let us talk about The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. If I had to describe this book, I think it's best described as what if a D&D player, Dungeons and Dragons player, was bragging about their character's backstory for 600 pages. Because really, that's what this book is. Now, I don't mean that as a negative thing. I really enjoyed this book. That said, this is not a perfect book by any stretch. I mean, I think this book has one of the best first acts of a book I've ever read. It was so well done at the beginning, but I cannot shake the feeling that this book and its sequel was written as a one book, and then the publisher was like, hey, this is too long. Can we cut it in half, like literally in the middle, and make them two separate books? Because I haven't read the second book, but the first book does not have an ending. It's almost like the story gets completely cut in half, and it's like, here's a cheap way we could kind of end it and put it all together. That's fine. You could do that if it's a series, but given that the third book hasn't been out, I think the third book is not out since forever. I don't know if I should continue this series, because if I'm gonna continue this series, I want to read all of the books. I want to complete the story. That said, let's talk about the first act, because this is one of the best first acts I've ever read. Wow, just wow. Like, you know the dramatic backstory archetype that Dungeons and Dragons players have with their characters? It genuinely feels like that archetype, but actually explained. Because usually in like D&D games, you always get players like who are like, oh, I'm so mysterious, my character's so mysterious, you don't know what really happened in their past, they have a dark past. Nothing ever is explained on what actually happened. Even I feel like in most campaigns, it's not really properly explained what happened to your character. And I feel like this is such a cool and funny book almost. Especially for people who do role-playing, I think should read this book, because it's kind of like, yeah, okay, my character is that character who's like, yeah, I can do everything. You know, I'm so mysterious, I have so many skill sets. And then actually goes into detail explaining how all of that came to be. Why is this character so mysterious? You kind of find out. Why is this character good at certain things? You find out. So yeah, that was an interesting part. I have not done research on this writer, but I'm gonna go out of my way and bet that this writer plays role-playing games. It feels like that, at least. Because here's what I'll say again. The story itself, the things that the main character protagonist constantly tells us are very generic fantasy hero themes. They're pretty generic, but they're done very well. And I feel like this book is also a very good example of like, take something that's pretty generic and then you can still make something that's really good out of it. You don't have to innovate every single time. This is I feel like this book is a great example of that. The writing style, I have to say this about the writing style. I think the writing style is very good, but this is another place where I'm like, this guy plays role-playing games, because his writing style is almost exclusively character focused. I do not think I saw maybe one or two places in the entire book where any form of landscape, environment, or surrounding was discussed or explained. None of that. Everything is character focused. It does make sense to the story though, because our protagonist is telling the story to another person, and they're telling the entire book, he's telling it as a story to this other person within the period of 3 days. So it does make sense that you would talk in the context of like, okay, I'm talking to a person who's already lived in this world, they already know the visual contexts of this world, and I just want to tell the story. But for somebody who's just being introduced to a fantasy world, and I don't get proper descriptions of the environment or the setting or the things around you, it's somewhat hard to imagine what this world looks like. I had a similar issue like this with George Martin's works, where it's like, now he does more of landscape explanations, but like I feel like I needed a bit more, or maybe this is just a personal bias that I really enjoy reading about environments. But I feel like there was just not enough of this. And it's almost like, okay, Like when you say the words tavern, when you say the words castle and whatever, we all have an image in our brain on what it could possibly look like. But for example, if you say magic school, right? It could mean anything. But also most of us just think of Harry Potter. Is that correct? Am I getting that right? Is that what you're thinking when I say magic school? Because Hogwarts is the only thing that comes to my mind. Now in this book there's a magic school, and it's very clear that it's not Hogwarts. This is a more grounded to earth magic school. But give some details on what the place kind of looks like. Give me some details on what the vibe is like in terms of the setting and stuff. Because all I can imagine is old people in ropes telling kids that, explaining them about sympathy, which is this world's magic system. Another thing we should describe, sympathy, this world's magic system. Very, very unique magic system, very simple. It feels like one of those things where it's like, it's very simple to understand, but very hard to master. And I already see myself that I'm going to have issues understanding the large, if there's more done with this magic system, if there's more bindings that's gonna happen with this magic system, I'm gonna have a hard time understanding what the logic is behind all of those. I feel like it's one of those things. But I also think it's such a cool system, and I would like to see such a thing in a video game, which I know is going to be extremely complex to make, but I'm genuinely interested because it's like such a cool thing that I've never heard of before. And I enjoyed it. The magic school part was boring to me. I know that's like the middle section of the book. So from the first act to the half of the magic school section, I enjoyed this book. I was into it. And then I genuinely started getting bored. I just did not care for anything that happened at the end of the magic school section. I feel like a lot of the steam it built in the beginning sections, which was done because it was so good. I feel like that steam really trailed off at the end. I feel like that's also caused partially because this genuinely felt like one giant book that was cut in half. That could have been the case, that could be not. I don't know about that, but I hope the second book starts giving us a bit more. I kind of want to start seeing him as a grown-up now. There's 600 pages of story. This book could have easily been, I don't know, 500, 400 pages. Genuinely, I believe that. There were so many places, there were so many chapters that were just kind of like fluff. It wasn't adding much. That's my opinion. That said, I think Patrick Rothfuss is an awesome writer. And I would love to pick up the rest of the books in this series, and I would like to see him tackle other themes that are not very fantasy. I would like to see him write actually in other settings, because I feel like his character focused perspectives in writing could really lend well in maybe like an urban fantasy setting, or like a modern world setting, contemporary. Yeah, so that was Name of the Wind. I'm gonna give it 4 out of 5, maybe 4.5. This was very enjoyable, and I highly recommend you all go and read it. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a good time. Bye bye.